Okay, we are here to talk about Severance, Season 2, Episode 7, Chikhai Bardo. This episode is written by Dan Erickson and Mark Friedman. It is directed by Jessica Lee Gagne, who's also the cinematographer for the show. In flashbacks, Mark and Gemma meet at a Lumen blood drive at their university. They eventually get married, but have trouble producing children, so they go to a Lumen fertility clinic. Shortly after this visit, Gemma goes to a party by herself where she, quote unquote, dies in an accident. Police come and report that death to Mark. Sometime after her death, Gemma lives on the testing floor at Lumen. She regularly is forced to visit a series of rooms that have the same names as some of the Lumen MDR files. Each of those rooms uncovers a different any version where Gemma has to deal with traumatic or emotional experiences. Dr. Maurer and Mr. Drummond oversee all of this and frequently talk with her and interview her about these experiences. At one point, Gemma attempts to break out by knocking out Dr. Maurer, but she goes up the elevator. She arrives on the severed floor Lumen and turns into Miss Casey. Mr. Milchick demands she go back into the elevator. Mark remains unconscious after his surgery. Dr. Ragabi tells Devin he's going to be okay, but Devin wants to call Miss Cobell for help. Ragabi does not like that, refuses it, and leaves at the suggestion of Cobell getting involved again. Shortly after, Mark wakes up, either remembered or dreamt a lot about Gemma. This episode, I think, much anticipated, highly discussed. I'm seeing mostly critically acclaimed. You and I might have similar thoughts on this, and you have a piece up on this already on the site. General
I
thoughts
do.
about this episode?
I do. Um, yeah, and I think we should start there. It does seem like a lot of the reaction is incredibly positive.
Mhm.
Like I'm seeing people on Blue Sky saying this is like the best episode of television ever made. And I didn't love it to that
Yeah.
extent, but I think what's interesting for us to talk about is why.
Yeah.
I don't want to be overly negative. I think it was a good episode. I think it was fine, but I found myself thinking since I watched it, what is it about it that didn't quite land for me? What didn't work for me? And
Hmm.
my starting place was that it didn't really feel like Severance. And I think we can dig into that um, in some ways that hopefully we can find interesting. What about you? Initial reactions?
Yeah, I think what I first my first gut reaction, I think I messaged you right after I finished it, just that I was thrown a bit by the multiple timelines. After some days, I've sort of, conceptualized how all that worked. I thought this episode was beautiful in the way that it's shot and the way that it's visioned and sort of how it goes back and forth between the sort of ways that they approach the production in terms of the look backs versus the modern. And they talk a lot about this on the official Severance podcast. I just it answered a lot of questions. But I don't know. I would we talked some about. Maybe I would have appreciated it more if it's just more of a linear story that was told. But just there were some things with the jumping back and forth between timelines that didn't sit quite right with how I wanted to frame this within the entire show.
That's interesting because I'm tempted to say I wanted it to be weirder.
Hmm.
Um, and I started thinking about the way it was directed.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Jessica Lee Gagne. This is her first director credit. She's been the cinematographer on the show and so on. And she is on the official podcast this week. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it.
Yep.
I sort of made a point. I wanted to listen to that part of the official pod. And so, all right, apologies if this is like a kind of a long
Mhm.
um what monologue on my part, but I've really been thinking about it because I kind of found myself appreciating the episode more in retrospect than when I watched it. Right, like when I watched it the first time, I kept feeling sort of dissatisfied. I kept feeling like this doesn't really feel like Severance, and the other thing that maybe should be a separate topic is it wasn't really like landing for me emotionally in a
Mm.
powerful way. But then when I look back on it, I think, oh, well, I see what they were doing. It's a great idea and so on. So I watched the episode again and I was really focused on the um, direction or on the cinematography.
Yeah.
Um, you know, because I guess Gagne also was often her own cinematographer, which she said on the podcast may have been a mistake, right? Um, but regardless, I think that's sort of beside the point insofar as it's the director who's making the decisions
Yeah.
that I'm going to refer to. And what stood out to me in this episode, particularly on that second watch where I was really attending to how it's shot,
Yeah.
there's a lot of panning. There's a
Mm.
lot of panning. There's a lot of kind of quick cuts. And this is different from other episodes of Severance. And I think that, I mean, obviously it was intentional, but I think maybe beyond that, it was intentional in a particular way in terms of this episode being distinctive.
Yeah.
But to me, it ended up with this effect of I want to be careful about this because I do think from a technical point of view, it's really, really, really well done.
Yes. Yes.
But maybe a big but, it didn't feel very interesting to me visually. The kind of visual language employed felt very I don't know if cliche is quite the right word, but it's like there's almost like a stock visual language that's deployed
Hmm.
in a lot of films and a lot of TV shows, and a lot of this felt like that to me.
Yeah.
And even when it tried to get weird, it didn't really get weird.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I remember Gagne talking about that on the podcast, the idea of how they were going to decide to invoke this idea of the past or the nostalgia or the life that the two of them had together. And she eventually came to the idea of, oh, it's a simple choice. If you just shoot it with this type of camera and this type of wave, that's always sort of in this industry meant to invoke nostalgia or invoke, looking back to something. And so it was just sort of like we'll just do what everybody has done. And
Well,
so
I
there
definitely
wasn't
think
any
that's part of
uniqueness
it.
to the
They
show.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
They shot the
yeah,
flashbacks on film.
exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. So there's just not the uniqueness maybe you would have expected. And then I certainly don't want to make light of the arc of their marriage, but that's I was touched by it, but it's a story that's been told a million times before on television and TV, right? They meet, things are great, get married, happy life, tragedy, heartbreak, overcome, then things are good again before this moment happens, right? That we sort of think of when she leaves. So that there was no uniqueness there either, I guess I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, to point to one specific example, at sort of the end of the flashbacks, right? When the cops come to Mark, you don't actually see him talking to the cops, right? But the way it is shot,
Hmm.
what happened, right? From a certain point of view, that's very cool
Yeah.
that just the visual language can operate that way. But at the same time, the reason that it works is because we've seen that before lots
Yeah.
of times.
Yeah.
Like that same kind of way of communicating visually. Um, so I mean that's okay. I mean, I don't mean it's the biggest critique in the world necessarily, but I happened to also go back and rewatch Woe's Hollow last night just for fun, just
Yeah.
because I love the episode. And I was thinking about this kind of stuff percolating in my mind, and that episode is shot in an entirely different way,
Yeah.
where the camera
Yeah.
is often steady and so on, right? There really is a lot of panning in episode 7 here, and the camera's almost never steady if you pay
Mm.
attention to it. So look, at a certain level, maybe it's just a matter of personal taste,
Yeah.
right? It's like my favorite film director is David Lynch. You know what I mean? And like talk about someone who will hold the shot too long.
Right.
Like David Lynch will hold the shot so long it starts to be uncomfortable because he's held the shot so long, right? And this
Yeah.
is totally the opposite from that. Nothing's held that long. It's always kind of quicker and more in line with how, I mean, lots of things are. And look, again, it's very well done. But I
Yeah,
find
yeah,
myself thinking a lot about that ultimately.
yeah. Well, why don't we get into some of the plot here because I think it was predicted and perhaps anticipated that we would get a flashback episode, right? Sort of see the Mark and Gemma story. We knew that they were both at a university. We knew they were professors. We knew that they would come to have this relationship together. So now it's the idea of, okay, we have all of this stuff now of they were at a Lumen blood drive. They went to a Lumen fertility clinic. They were giving Lumen all this personal information. So now there are these questions that exist about to what extent do we believe A, that Gemma was in an accident and Lumen just sort of claimed her, and B, I've even seen some speculation of was Gemma in on this because she was sort of buying into things that Lumen was doing and was interested in their Bardo cards and all these different things that she was starting to get attached to. What do we think now about sort of this idea of how Gemma got there as opposed to just, oh, she was in a car crash, she died. Oh, not really.
Yeah, I mean, I find myself after this episode thinking there she was not in a car crash.
Right.
Her car may have crashed after Lumen kidnapped her, but she was. I don't think she. I mean, we're not really seeing evidence of her having been, even seriously injured in a car crash.
Yep.
Um, that could be wrong. We don't know for sure.
Yep.
We don't get. It would have potentially been interesting to me if we'd gotten Gemma's perspective on what happened that night. It's an interesting thing because it's like on the one hand, there's a lot of information in this episode, but on the other hand, I don't know, is there really?
Yeah.
Like how much do we really learn?
What information was given actually opened up doors to all new sets of things we don't know, such as, yeah, I think there was a lot of assumption out there that Gemma was not, it's not as simple a story as was in a car accident and they've revived her, resurrected her, or done something to her. But does that mean that they kidnapped her? Does that mean that she did something willfully? Does that mean that she was signed up for, we just don't have those answers now. It seems like there's a lot of ambiguity that could take place there.
Yeah, and I kind of found myself wishing that they'd gone ahead and answered that question
Yeah.
because I mean, how much you're going to keep withholding and how do you find ways that make narrative sense to answer some of these questions?
Yeah.
There was a way to do it here. So is there a good reason to withhold that bit? Because it does matter in my mind. I mean, I guess I presume we'll find out what they're doing with Gemma, like what the long game is, what Cold Harbor is in one way or another. But I had kind of been thinking that this was a matter of playing Dr. Frankenstein
Mm.
with Gemma's corpse or something,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
Right.
now I'm no longer thinking that. And that makes a
Exactly.
big difference in terms of how I'm thinking about, well, what is Lumen up to? And everything they say is really vague, like they're going to sire a new world where everyone will benefit. And it's like at some point it needs to start making a little
Yeah.
bit more sense.
I wish they had given us the Gemma point of view, especially because there were multiple things she says in this episode, such as, I want to go see Mark. Once I'm done, will I be able to go out again? Will I be able to leave? She tries to break out, right? So it's the sense of, okay, that those actions and words don't tell us that she's in on this or wants to be a part of this. So why not show us, she was captured or Lumen decided that she was special because of all this information they had about her, so they just took her one night, something.
I mean, that's sort of what I'm thinking is that, okay, well, they've gathered this information based on her blood, based on the fertility clinic, which is also Lumen. Then they start sending her stuff like a duck, a rabbit, or whatever, duck rabbit,
Mhm.
and the Bardo card, which is a direct connection. I think it's even the same card we saw Dylan steal
Yep.
in season one. And so there are lots of indications there that they were selecting her to be this test subject, you know. Um, so then that makes me think she didn't get into a car accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if that means that they abducted her that night, it's almost like, well, why not just show that if
Why
that's
not
the
just show
answer,
that?
you know?
And
You want
I
to,
love speculating about the idea that, oh, they had all this information, DNA, blood, all of this, these physical things that make up Gemma. Did they somehow make a Gemma body and pass that? You know, Mark has a box of remains in his basement. Now those
mhm.
are cremated remains. So did he get to see Gemma before? You know, presumably yes. So, you know, what did they do? How did they manipulate that? I'd be curious to know that story as well.
Okay, so here's a possibility that could explain why they don't show us what happened. Maybe she actually did get into a car accident and died, and the Gemma in the testing floor is a clone or something like that.
Yeah, certainly could be a yeah, fully developed human that yeah, I guess that they're trying to they have made a new Gemma who would know Mark, who would know her history, who would know all these things, but they're trying to make it a severed person as well. So that's where all these different experiences start. I mean, I still think it's the real Gemma, but
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's the thing. I don't think it's that. I don't really want it to be that either. Not that that matters, but I don't really think it's that. I think this is the real Gemma. And when I say I don't want it to be that, it's because to the extent that there was something emotionally powerful in this episode, it would really undermine it a bit if we found out that it was a clone,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think. But let's talk about that a little bit more because, again, I'm not trying to be too negative, but did you feel like we needed all of the flashbacks at an emotional level? Because at first I was really thinking we didn't, and I kind of said that in my article on tvobsessive.com. But the more I think about it, maybe I was wrong. Maybe we kind of did need more here. What did you think on that
I,
level, like
I found
between Gemma
myself
and Mark?
Yeah, I found myself when I was reading your piece agreeing with you that somehow, even though we have not really seen them much together, except for a very cold surface level Mark and Miss Casey interaction, somehow they have still displayed to us how much love they had for one another, how much care that they had for each other, how devastated Mark was when this happened. And so, yeah, I found myself thinking, yeah, that's true. They have shown us sort of the, or made us believe in the emotional connection that they had even before this episode. I do appreciate some of the just, this is who they are and how they met and sort of how they got to the point that so I think some of that was needed. I might have actually liked to include some of the perhaps corresponding experiences or memories that go with why doing these certain things in certain rooms, right? Did she have a traumatic dentist experience, a traumatic Christmas experience, an almost plane crash? You know, these types of things that are happening in the rooms. We'd like to see some of that.
Let's run through that really quick because there is some stuff there, right? And so this is one of the hazards of the fact that I actually wrote that article several days ago, and then I'm thinking about it all week. But the nice thing is we get to do a podcast where I can mention things that I didn't get in my article.
Yeah.
So hopefully people both read that and listen here. But particularly watching it again, there are all right. So here are the moments that stood out to me that this might not be an exhaustive list. I'm sure
Okay.
someone might be pouring through the episode with an even finer tooth comb than I have so far. The thank you cards, right? Um, there is a moment when Mark says to Gemma, "You hate writing thank you cards,"
Yeah, that's true.
in the flashback. There's a Christmas tree in the flashback. There is when Gemma is leaving the night that she quote unquote died or whatever. She says, "I love you." Mark doesn't say it back. She's like, "Hey, and I said I love you," and it's like, "Oh yeah, sorry," right? We see a repetition of that also between Gem, whatever any version of Gemma and Dr. Meyer on the testing floor. Um, why the dentist? I don't know.
Yeah.
Why the turbulent plane? I'm going to go with Lost reference. I don't know, but like I'm not fitting it into the narrative. But if you think about like even some of those connections between what they're doing and Mark and Gemma's life,
Yeah.
there's a potentially really disturbing implication there that they had them under surveillance, like in their house.
Yeah, I do wonder. Yeah, I don't think we know how much time has passed between when they meet at the blood drive and her accident, but it's a significant period of time. I mean, it's months or years or
Mhm.
somewhere in that neighborhood. So yeah, there could be a discovery of, oh, these people have what we're looking for and something genetically, physically, biologically. And so they are, yeah, under Lumen's watch for some period of time before this all happens. I could certainly see that being part of it.
Yeah, I think it might be. I think that's one thing we can read in here.
Yeah.
Then the other thing is, it's still like, well, what the hell are they doing? Why are they? I understand that they want that part of what's going on with Gemma is how to put this, like multiple severance, that she severed multiple times, that there
Yeah.
are all of these different versions of her, not just Indy and Audi, but apparently Audi, right? Like Gemma, and
Yeah.
then at least seven Indies that we're aware of.
At least, yes, at least seven. And I guess we should sort of mechanically think about this. Do you believe that at one point there is the conversation between Maurer and Drummond of did the severance barrier hold? I think you've referenced this, um, and so she is going into these rooms as any severed version of herself to see if those relived moments at all bring her back to or create memories in her that would mean that there's still a link between the Audi and the any version of Gemma.
Yeah, I mean, I guess is it just that they're doing this in order to test the barriers, as it were? I mean, that makes some sense. But there's another question here about the connection between those rooms and what MDR is doing.
Yeah. Yeah, they're
Um,
all names of the files that we've seen pop up on computer screens and when they're mining data.
Many
Um,
of which have been completed. I haven't done the
it's
work of pairing up the rooms we saw with the completed files, but just working from memory, I believe that those are completed files.
yeah.
I think
So
I think they're all completed files, but I'm not positive on that front.
and
Speaking
so
of which, let's play a fun little game we'll throw in here. Um, the name, one of those file names, one of those room names, is my middle name. You want to guess which one?
no way. Oh, I don't
Yeah.
have the list in front of me. Uh,
Okay.
Allentown. That's the one that just
Cameron Allentown Craig. Come on, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
what is it?
Uh,
What's the middle name?
Cairns.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, does that mean anything? I mean, it must be a meaning,
It's
obviously, to the name, but
Well, I mean, yes, it's a family name, but also a cairn is like a stack of stones, potentially.
okay.
It could be a funeral monument kind of thing, but I'm not sure if it always is.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, we get a reference to the fact that apparently the Cold Harbor name has just been put up on the door. She hasn't
Hmm.
gone in there yet. And so I guess we're just to obviously we've seen that on the Mark side. We've seen that she's now not gone in this room yet. We've seen how important it is to Lumen. We know the finale of the season is named Cold Harbor. So is this like the final boss room, as it were? And what's going to happen there? Is Mark going to be in there? Sort of what's going to happen in that when we get to that room?
She's going to sire a new world, and everyone will benefit. I mean,
Exactly.
they told us
Clear as day. Yes.
it's going to be a monumental event akin to the invention of fire.
That's right.
Um,
Milchek will live in glory. That's right.
no idea, no
No
idea. I
idea.
mean, it's weird because I had been thinking that the MDR files were people, and now it seems like we're being told that they are rooms. But I guess they could also still be people.
They represent parts of people.
They would all the people would be Gemma.
Yeah, yeah.
It's any thoughts about the fact that it seems like she's the only one down there? I
Well,
kind of thought that there'd be other people down there, other test
we've
subjects.
got what we know we now have more than 200 other Lumen offices, so there's this is happening lots of places apparently.
Do we know that?
No, we don't.
Is maybe not? Maybe this is the only Lumen office. We don't know. I mean, like they lie. They lie so much. This is the tallest waterfall on Earth. It's been 5 months since the OTC. They lie all over the place. But yeah, I mean, I do think that there are other lumen offices.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I guess it's still possible that this is the only lumen office that is engaged in this project. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
We need to talk about Robbie Benson, who was
Yes.
great. Yeah, he was
Absolutely.
great in this episode. And his outfits are hilarious. And I love when Drummond looks at him, he's like, "Why are
Why
you
are
wearing
you
that stupid sweater?"
why are you wearing that stupid sweater? He just gives him a
Uh,
look. Yeah, I loved it. I loved it.
the fact that he also has facial hair sometimes and not other
Yes.
times. This is, I mean, why? Because I know that you can do this. Like they were talking on the official podcast about how Adam Scott's facial hair in the flashbacks is applied by,
Right.
the makeup artist. He didn't grow stubble for it. So
Right.
like I know you can do that. And on the testing floor, they could be doing that with Dr. Meyer, but like, why go to all that trouble?
Yeah.
Because I mean, this is like very realistic fake facial hair. This isn't,
Yeah.
I don't know, any thoughts on that?
I
Why do that?
I I can only think that it was maybe in the very, very beginning a sense of trying to maybe they need to try to disguise who this guy was, just in case the severance barrier didn't hold and she recognized him from room to room. I mean, it's kind of hard. It's pretty easy to tell who he is, regardless. But I don't know. He just represents someone that looks like that at the whatever this memory is that she's experiencing in that room.
Yeah, I don't know. Something to think about.
Yeah,
Because it could be along those lines of testing the barriers. So do you recognize him across rooms? But as you say, I mean, I think you're going to recognize Robbie Benson across like it doesn't he doesn't feel disguised to me
yeah,
ever.
that's right. That's
His
right.
his eyes are so striking, and so on and so forth, right? Um, so I don't know, but it's there, and particularly the facial hair part. So it's one thing to just put on a new outfit, but the fact that he's going through fake facial hairs. Um, Chikhai Bardo, we should talk about. This is the fourth
Yes.
Bardo in Tibetan Buddhism, um, which I am by no means an expert on, but it does have to do with death and transition to death and a transmutation of elements and so on and so
Mhm.
forth. I definitely think it fits thematically. I don't know how much more I have to say about it. What about you?
Yeah, just that it represents a sort of crossing over time. I'm absolutely no expert in this, but this idea of Mark trying to cross over from a period of grief to what he becomes in a severed person, and Gemma in this state of, she's both, you can describe both, alive and dead at the same time, right? She's an outie at some points in time, she's in any other parts of time, and she's just in this moment where she's trying to cross into something, and she doesn't know what that is, and we certainly don't know what that is yet either.
Yeah. And Gemma mentions ego death. Can say something brief about that at least. I have some level of understanding here. I'm just not an expert really in Tibetan Buddhism in particular, but in Buddhism in general, that idea of um, kind of killing the ego, if you want to put it that way, is relatively central, right?
Yeah.
Desire is the cause of suffering, and so on and so forth. And um, so to, she interprets that card this
Yes.
way. The card itself isn't labeled or whatever, right? She's like, oh, that's Chicago. So, like, maybe the fact that she sort of got that right and that was the
Yeah.
idea is part of why she gets sucked in by Lumen.
Yeah.
Of course, we saw in O and D other cards, and you know, it might be interesting. I'm not going to do this because, again, I'm not an expert on Tibetan Buddhism, but if someone out there knows more about Tibetan Buddhism than I do,
Yeah.
you go back to those O and D cards and see if you can like link up each card to a different Bardo.
Bardo. Yeah.
That'd be kind of cool. That'd be kind of fun. Thoughts about Cobell?
Yeah, this is really lending some stuff to the theory, and I don't know if Devin and Cobell or Devin and Selvig are keeping in touch with one another, but it's really lending some credence to the theory of perhaps Cobell is changing sides, right? Ragabi hasn't had any interaction with her, so still thinks she's a Lumen loyalist. Maybe Devin has come to learn that she's not. It's also somebody liken this to the, Terminator 2 situation where, she's going to come back and instead of being the evil killing machine, she is, in some benevolent way can help take care of them. I just wish she would come back so we could figure it out.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, certainly I know a lot of people are hoping that she's going to change sides, and I'm one of them, but I don't know if I think it's going to happen or should happen or I mean, we've talked about this before. She's a really interesting character, but it's hard to read her motivations.
Yes,
Now we haven't
yes.
seen her for a few episodes. Um, where is she at in, well, both physically and in
Hmm.
terms of how she feels about Lumen? Because she has been a devotee of Lumen, and Ragabi's right. She was like raised by Lumen.
Yeah.
Um, you don't call up this woman. I'm out of here, right? And
Yeah.
I don't think that Devin has been in touch with her. I think she knows that Cobell was fired because Mark told her.
Hmm.
I mean, he saw Mrs. Selvig, who he knows is Cobell. He saw her leaving her house and
Yeah.
so on because they
Yeah.
were neighbors. Um, so she has this idea of calling Cobell. Did she maybe? I mean, we don't see her call Cobell, but it is
Yeah.
possible that she
It,
did.
it certainly is possible, and maybe that's the trigger that brings her back. She wanted nothing to do with this situation. She wanted to get as far away from Lumen and whatever Elena was going to do to her. But will something like this be the sort of the linchpin that brings her back? I think it's certainly possible.
Yeah, it would work narratively, right? On the other hand, I totally think Ragabi is right. It's like,
Yeah.
do not call that woman. I'm out of here.
Yeah, really.
She's just going to turn us into Lumen and so on. Because honestly, even if we've seen that tension or what have you, um, I still feel like there's every chance that Cobell would say like, "Oh well, here's a new opportunity to get back in their good graces," which is what
Yes.
she
Oh,
really
yes.
wants,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right?
I think that there is such a equal possibility for both of those directions. That's what makes it so interesting, right? Is that she has had so much thrown at her from Lumen and is so disenfranchised that she goes the direction of helping Mark and Devin and all of them, or she's looking for any way to get back in, and this is the way to do it. I think that's equally possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that would make the most sense in some way would be for her to re-enter the story in a way that's against the powers that be at Lumen, but because she feels like they are betraying what Kier would really want. So
Yeah.
something like that sort of structure is what
Yep.
would make the most sense, right?
Yep.
Like I'm the true devotee of Kier, you're perverting Kier's vision or something like that. So we'll see. I definitely expect that she'll be back in the story by the end of the season. I'll be disappointed at least if she isn't.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, she has to show up by the end. I mean, that just must happen.
Yeah. All right. Other thoughts
Yeah.
about things, other things we need to hit on here? I feel like there should be more, but
We
in
have,
some ways, the broad points of this episode are, there's just
yeah.
kind of a couple.
And only one real story one real line to look through. I will say, as we were recording this episode, I got my, I guess, weekly email from Esquire, and the lead story is the best TV episode of the year, talking about this
No, I
episode.
mean, it's just like I don't know, man. I don't want to argue with people, and I don't want to. I don't want to like. I never want to convince anyone that something is worse than they feel it is. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
not. I'm not trying to yuck your yums or anything.
yep.
I mean, I'll just say, in my personal opinion, this is not even the best episode of Severance this year.
Yeah, yeah. That,
So
that would be Woes Hollow.
yeah, that would be well solid. I did. Well, speaking of which, sort of, I did think of one more thing we should talk about. We didn't even get in our notes, which was an oversight on our part. The Mark Watcher, or whatever we call it, when we go
Oh,
into that room and clearly Mark and MDR are under surveillance, and then there's four people and we started wondering and exchanged a couple DMs about
Mhm.
whether those were their doppelgangers who were
Yeah.
credited as shadows previously.
Yeah.
But the one watching Mark clearly isn't. It's a different actor. Both actors
Yeah.
are credited in the show credits, so that's a different actor. The other three, one of whom really does kind of look like
Like
Dylan,
Dylan.
and you could maybe see how one sort of looks like Kelly and the other one sort of looks like Irving. Maybe.
Yeah.
I didn't find credits for them.
No, nor
They're credited in Woe's Hollow,
yes.
but I didn't find credits for them and for those actors in this episode to be able to see whether they were the same actors or not.
Yeah. No, that I do just fascinated me. I mean, it's probably this thing defunct by the idea that these are separate actors, but yeah, I don't want to
Still,
completely close the door on that yet.
still, I'm glad I thought of this because regardless, there's a question of what are they doing there?
Exactly.
And my first read of that scene, where I mean it's going pretty fast and they're hitting their keyboards and all of that. My first read of that scene was that they're refining MDR.
MDR. Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I'm imagining at this point that refining is, I don't know, they're refining this severed like the chip in Gemma's brain or what
Yeah.
have you. And so maybe everyone who is severed is subject to refinement.
That absolutely could be the case. I did see my brain going there as well. I That would be fascinating. I really hope that's a thread they pull out some more once we look into whoever these people are.
Yeah, I hope so too. So we'll see. We've got what, 3 episodes left this
Yep.
season. Um, it's funny, man. Like I remember back after episode 3 saying, "Well, this seems to be progressing very quickly." Yeah, not anymore, not anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
now I'm starting to wonder, like, are they going to get there by the end of the season? Like, they're meaning um somewhere substantial in terms of what Cold Harbor is and so
Yeah.
on. I mean, I think we know that the last episode of the season is called Cold Harbor. I think we
It
know
is.
that. So
Yeah.
presumably we'll get some answers, and then I sort of have the feeling things are just going to crack wide open, but I could be wrong. We'll see. Definitely looking forward to the rest of the season. Anything else you want to hit on before we wrap up?
I think we've about covered it. Yeah. Next week, Sweet Vitriol, the name of our episode. We'll see what that is all about.
That does kind of make me think about Harmony Cobell.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but we'll see. We have no idea. We haven't seen it yet.
We have not.
No one's seen it yet. Well, I mean, yeah, Ben
Couple people.
Stiller's seen it. Whatever.
Yeah.
Some people have seen it, but um, hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. Thanks as always for listening. Please do leave us a good rating, review, what have you. If you're on YouTube, press that thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. It'd be much appreciated. And you can check out tvobsessive.com. You can find articles from myself there on each episode of Severance, and articles on any number of other shows as well. Ryan's currently covering The White Lotus, for example, and I'm also on Yellow Jackets, and there is other stuff coming down the pike like the Righteous Gemstones, Daredevil Born Again, the Rehearsal season 2, and I don't know, probably some more stuff that we're definitely going to cover. So check out the site. You can follow TV Obsessive on social media. Search for TV Obsessive, and we'll see you next week.
All right. See you next week for episode 8.